Computer. Welcome, 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 everybody, to another Sunday of When Black Women Gather. We are here this Sunday. I'm Helen Higginbotham, founder of When Black Women Gather, and I'm here this Sunday with Dr. Peggy Bertram, who's going to walk us through her journey of being diagnosed with and managing life with Parkinson's disease. Hello, Dr. Bertram.
Hi, how are you?
Doing good, doing good. This is your birthday is tomorrow, so we'll say
Yeah,
wish you a happy birthday before we get started.
yeah, I'm
And
gonna
I
be
hope
81.
Whoa,
81.
happy
Wow.
birthday.
You there?
Thank you.
Melanin, it's a beautiful, I call it the gift from God. Black woman's
Sure is.
gift from God.
That's it. Don't get it wrong.
81. Yeah. Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Um, Bertram before we get started. I sent in the chats to you just a little bit about her. She's been with us before, and she shared with us her work on letters to Michelle Obama, but she's reminding me that she also did a book on letters to Kamala. What year was the work to on Michelle Obama? What
Oh
year was
God.
that?
When
Were they
Obama,
still in office?
yeah, I mean,
Okay.
just gotten in office.
Okay.
Just gotten
Yep.
in
And then she did it again
Cameron.
with Kamala Harris.
Mhm.
Um, and she is a two-time John Hopkins graduate. And her degree in uh, shoot, I got your first degree. Her degree was in, I don't know why I don't have it here. I thought I had it written right here. I don't. Can you tell
But
us what your first, you two degrees from John
uh,
Hopkins, and I know they had to do with health.
yeah, I had a master's of public health and a master's of health education in public health.
And your doctoral degree?
Is from the University of Buffalo, the State University of New York, basically. And that was from the Department of African American Studies.
And you've been an activist and um, a social historian,
Mhm.
and your specialty has been African American history on African American women. Is that correct?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yes. And she has several. She's co-founder and president of Uncrowned Queens Institute for Research and Education on Women. I already told you that one of her books was Letter to Michelle Obama. Another one was a similar book focused on letters to Kamala Harris. And she's got a book that's coming out soon called Forge in the Alley House. She will share some of that with us today. And her other works, I'm going to put these in the chat so you all can grab them. Marrow and Bones, the biography of Drusilla Dungy. I'm sure she'll tell us about her works. And another pending book is Uncrowned Queens, um, African American Women in the community. And is that focused solely on Buffalo?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But
And
it's being
And
looked at.
Peggy, Dr. Bertram grew up in Baltimore and she's now a resident of Buffalo. So thank you so much for coming and wanting to share your time and your story with us today. I appreciate it a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shall I begin?
Okay. Yeah. So we're gonna have just an informal conversation
Okay.
between Dr. Bertram and I, and those of you who are online, you can jump in the conversation. You can put questions in the chat, whatever you're comfortable with, and we'll just take it from there. So let's just start out with I guess we told us a little. You can tell us a little bit more about yourself if you want to.
Well, I guess, yeah, well, I grew up, I wrote something about the little house we lived in. And I looked at this particularly, and when I thought about it, I thought about how the kind of environments that Black people were raised in and lived in and stayed for a long time, and its implications for illness. And and particularly true in the case of Parkinson's, there are all kinds of things that contribute, very potently. And so if you listen to this, I say that my family was not living alone in the alley house structure. We had permanent residents. I thought about them poetically. Roaches everywhere, and oh, the walls did stink, hiding all over the place, especially under the sink. The roaches were everywhere in the neighborhood. One of the most fascinating things I learned about roaches was that when a pregnant roach was injured, she flicked the belly of babies away from her so that they could survive. Often you can see those babies flee the sack as if the mother had called to tell them to run. Ooh, that makes me sick.
That's I think you're sharing that with us because when we start talking about Parkinson's,
Yeah.
sometimes environment is one of the causing factors. Is that what you're suggesting when you share that with us?
Oh, sure. And so that's just, an introduction to that section. But the other part of it that I think is relevant is that one, we were very, very poor, and we oftentimes had the electricity turned off. And because of that, we would burn oil in a lamp, and the children would carry kerosene from one room to the other so we could see. And that was one thing. And the other thing was that we also cooked with the kerosene, and we also used it to keep us warm. But it was amazing when I thought about it, cooking with kerosene was how you could, I mean, not cooking with it, but lighting a fire with it. And was that and we couldn't escape it. And each of the children, my mother had um, 12 pregnancies. And but each of the children, as they were coming up, we had a role to play, and it was assigned to us. And one of them was we had to go down the street to the corner store and carry the kerosene can. And we were just itty bitty little kitties. And as we walked, if there was any kerosene in the carrier that we had, it would often spill out. We'd take a step, boom, some would fall, but it would fall on our coats or our shoes or our hands. And so we
Why?
were always in the presence of kerosene. And we knew we were eating kerosene also because Mr. Vincent's store on the corner, which I visited maybe a month ago or two in Baltimore. I remember, I mean, it's closed, of course, but what I remember is that when the little ones from my family went to his store to pick up kerosene, I mean, that was a job that we had, and I couldn't have been much higher than that. And and Mr. Vincent had a pump in the middle of his little shop, and we'd have to go and hook the top of it up over the handle so we could, get the pump get the pump working. And when the pump was working, the first thing, it would splash all over us. We'd had kerosene on it, so we were always trying to wipe kerosene off of us. And then Mr. Vincent would see it, and he was angry because he says, "This is a waste of the kerosene." And we said, "Well, we need some help." And so he would come over. Now, he had just come from behind the counter cutting meat and stuff like that. He never washed his hands. I always come in, never washed his hands. So whenever we ate salami that my father loved, we also ate kerosene. So, and that
That's relevant because Parkinson's disease is a chronic neurodegenerative disorder that
Mhm.
ultimately affects many things, but movement is primary. So being subjected to those conditions, you're I guess you try to look back and say, where did this come from? So talk to us a little bit about how did you get your diagnosis and what steps did you go through? Because one of the things we need to talk about today is first of all, let me give a disclaimer that Dr. Bertram is not here as a specialist of any kind on Parkinson's. She is sharing with us her journey. So her what she will share with us is her experience and things that she's learned along the way. And we're grateful that she is willing to share that with us. While she's still able to recollect everything, and I'm so happy that she can. And she reached out to me to want to do this, so I really, really appreciate it because Parkinson's is one of those things that we probably just think is never going to happen to us. So, how did you get your diagnosis and what was the journey to get you there?
Well, it was interesting because it was so funny because I was walking down the street one day and I had on shorts. And a friend of mine was walking in front of me. And then when she saw me, she turned around. Oh, Peggy, how are you doing? I said, fine. And I noticed that she looked at my right knee in a very strange way. And I didn't say anything to her, but it was unnerving to me. So when I got home, I stood in the mirror and I noticed that my right knee had like turned in a strange way. And that's the way I was walking. And I didn't even feel that change. And I didn't even see it. And I said, oh, what the heck is this? And so immediately, I went to see an orthopedic person, and they never said anything about Parkinson's. And and I also had an injury, swimming. I never learned how to swim until I was like 68. So I go and I said, okay, I'm going to do this or die doing it. So I learned how to swim, but I injured this arm over here, I thought. And they said, well, we'd like to do, the surgery for the cuff here, the rotator cuff. I said, oh, no, that's not going to happen. I said, why don't I just do the exercise and, and help myself that way, but I don't want any surgery. Okay, great. So we went on, I did that, and I did that exercise for maybe like 2 years. And and then shortly after that is when I saw the thing about my leg. So I go to see an orthopedic surgeon and I said, look, what's the deal here? I said, this is looking so funny. He says, oh, you need a knee replacement. And I said, oh God. And so sure enough, that was the case. And so I made arrangements to have that. And it was supposed to be just a 4-day deal, getting back in the saddle. And as soon as I had sort of gotten out of that, stuff the cast that I was in and what have you, I noticed that I was having difficulty remembering things. And I was having difficulty. I can. Am I talking loud enough?
I hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Okay. And I noticed that I couldn't, what did I say?
Your knee. You were talking about your knee. You had the
Yeah,
surgery.
yeah. So, but I noticed that I couldn't remember things clearly, and I felt kind of frightened or hesitant or disturbed all the time. So I said, "What's going on here?" So the knee is healing and what have you, but and I kept going to my surgeon saying, what's happening? I said, I'm having some problems, all kinds of problems that I didn't have before. So he said, okay, so he must have suspected something, but he never said anything. So he set me up for a scale, a test of, a memory scale. And that was like a wild scene. I won't go into that, but that was a wild scene. And so at the conclusion of all of that, he said, look, he said, I think they sent me to get MRIs of the brain and what have you. But I still was having difficulty remembering things, where I put things and what I said, all that sort of stuff. And I was, it's on schedule to get a book published by University of Oklahoma Press. And so they were waiting for this, and I couldn't even string a couple of sentences together. And I said, okay, this is getting crazy. So then I go back to the surgeon. I said, listen, what's happening here? I said, what did you use? What did you use for you know, for anesthesia? And he says, oh, we use the regular anesthesia, such and such. I said, okay, great. So he opened his folder and she said, oh no, I made a mistake. And he said, we actually used something else. And that might account for, what happened. I said, okay. I said, well, okay, then I thought this whole thing would resolve itself. But after that, everything started to go downhill. So I said, okay, let me go see somebody who's a neurologist. So I go to a neurologist, and then the neurologist says, look, um, I think you should start taking levodopa so that you can continue to do things. I'm saying, none of this I knew what the story was. And
Dr. Peggy, a couple of people are saying they are having problems hearing you, so we do need you to move a little closer
okay, good.
in.
And listen to this also.
That's good.
And I can understand that because the one of the problems with Parkinson's is that you lose the ability to speak. And one of the exercises that should be used daily is reading aloud, reading and pronouncing things as correctly as you can, and that sort of thing. So I oftentimes do that out in my back terrace, and and so I can hear myself. So so he said, so they gave me a test, and it was like 6 hours. And at the conclusion of it, and looking through everything, he said, poof, I think you have Parkinson's. And I said, you gotta be kidding. And I only slightly knew what it was. I knew I'd seen people with it, And that sort of began my horror story of Parkinson's and Peggy, so it was, and then immediately what kicked in was there were two physicians, and I said, listen, I'm getting a second opinion out here. And in doing that, so one was an older doctor and one was a younger man. So for me, I had the benefit of looking at somebody who had spent years in the service and taking care of people, and somebody who hadn't. And it was quite different experience. And so now, that was 2023. So here we are, 2025. And in the course of that time, I have watched myself unable to remember a number of things that were, just easy for me. And so I'm saying that, so I had when the neurologist talked to me, he said, here's what's happening. You have a loss of dopamine to the brain and loss of ability to control your face, because Parkinson's attacks the face. And the way it attacks the face is that it creates, almost like a little fungus of some kind. And the first time I noticed it, it was like, I felt it on the sides of my face and my chin. And when I looked and saw, there was like little pustules trying to come out. And I said, oh no, this cannot work here. And it turned out, and I immediately got in touch with the dermatologist. And the dermatologist says, oh, Peggy, yeah, this is a major part of Parkinson's is draining the pores of the body, especially in the face and the whole head, as a matter of fact, draining it of moisture. And as a result, it creates wrinkles, and they really deep, deep wrinkles, and thousands of them. I said, oh, that is not nice at all, And while I haven't gotten to that phase, I know that that's something that can happen, and I've seen it before. And I kept saying, what happened to that person? What happened? And but the loss of dopamine is a real, thing for the brain. If you don't have dopamine, you can't really think clearly at all. You might have episodes when you're thinking clearly, but maybe you're not. And everything gets affected. Loss of sleep, loss of appetite, loss of about 25, 35 pounds, and just, I mean, I never in my life experienced something where you just couldn't eat. You didn't want to eat, nothing. And food didn't taste the same. It didn't even look the same. And my husband was cooking his tail off, trying to see what would I eat. And that never changed, except they upped the medication that he gave me, and the medication, and that created, a respite from, just not being able to eat. It's terrible. And then I went to see a person who's people who have TMJ, and she said,
Right.
she says, "Oh, Peggy," she said, "this is going to get terrible." I said, "Oh, Jesus." So it was like, soaking my face in hot compresses a couple times a day. And then,
Can you tell us about, you were talking about the facial. I thought you were going to go to the facial recognition, because
yeah,
that I had never heard of until you told me.
and that no one ever discussed that with me at any length except one young doctor, very young woman, at the Eye Institute. And she did that because I had gone to the Eye Institute because Parkinson's causes something called dry eye. And your eyes water all the time. I'm so surprised I don't have my napkins out here and that my eyes are not watering. And and then your nose runs because the place in the brain, the supranegra, is a place where dopamine is made. And if the dopamine doesn't if that spot doesn't produce dopamine, then it means that a whole bunch of things go wrong, primary of which is your eyes, your smell, your taste. And those are the kinds of things that make up dementia. 3 different kinds of dementia. Either one dementia called, oh my gosh, what is it? Well, it's a Parkinson's dementia, but it has a specific name. One of them is Lewy bodies white spots. And you can see them in the brain when you do an MRI. And it's like a spongy kind of material that builds up in the brain. And it blocks the ability of the supranuclear to make the dopamine produce, so that your face stays wrinkle free, so to say, or it makes it possible for you to be able to raise your eyebrows. So you can't, essentially when you're really fully in the throes of this vicious condition, you can't do that. And you can't speak, or your voice is so low that you can't hear. Or then your writing starts to diminish so that it's tiny little writing, and you can't write any larger than that. So those are some of the things. But the thing that really killed me at first when I said, "Oh no, this is a bad scene, Peggy," and that was that hallucinations. So casually, the doctor said, "Oh, you're gonna have you had any hallucinations yet?" And I said, "No, is that coming too?" And so he said, "Yeah, it might." And that was so funny because everything you put in your mind comes out somehow. And in this case, I would every morning watch a show where a man was rescuing dogs who were destined to be euthanized. And all kinds of dogs from all over the country. He went everywhere, and I loved that show. And then when the hallucinations started, my hallway was filled with dogs, like 50 or 60 dogs in the hallway. It was amazing. They didn't threaten me. They didn't look threatening. It was just, I couldn't hear them. And so I said to the doctor, I said, "Well, what is this about?" So he says, "Don't interact with them." I said, "What are you talking about?"
One thing, you certainly have a good disposition around all of this, which is very nice. But talk to us, because I had never heard of the inability to recognize
Oh
faces.
yeah, it's called uh, facial blindness. Facial
And what
blindness.
is it? So people who may not know what it is, because I didn't.
You just can't see people's faces from a distance. And I'll tell you how the way I found out that I was suffering with that was that one day my husband and I were driving back home from someplace, and apparently there was a fire, and and people had to be diverted to another street. And so while we were driving down the street, I was just looking out at the people who were on the porches and whatever. And I noticed that one of the people didn't have a face. I was in my car. I said, well, wait a minute, what's happening here? And then I noticed that another person at that distance, I couldn't see their body. I saw their hat. It was like the hat was just sitting on thin air. And I said, oh, so I didn't say anything to Dennis for a while. And then when we got home, I told him what this story was. He said, oh, that sounds so crazy. So the next day or so, I saw one of my neighbors coming across the street to me, and he had no face. I said, Paul, is that you? He said, yes, it's me. I said, oh, I said, because I couldn't see you clearly. And then another time it happened, Dennis and I were swimming, and he was at 8 feet and I was in 3 feet. And I looked at 3 feet, from 3 feet to 8 feet, and I couldn't see his face. And the only way I knew him was because he had on tan trunks. And I just knew him by the trunks. And I thought, oh, this is crazy. So then I go to the ophthalmologist, and the ophthalmologist was an older man. And something I learned was that the the that different physicians do things differently, and it's nuts. And so he was seeing me. He says, I don't know what's wrong. Can you see that? And I said, no. He said, well, can you see this? And I said, no. He says, well, when do you have most of these problems? I said, anywhere I can have this problem. But if the person is at least maybe 10 or 15 feet away from me, nothing. And then it was just absolutely incredible. I said, this is too crazy. So then I go back to the doctor. The doctor says, let me, how is this? He was testing my vision. How is this? I said, well, no, that's not good. That's not good. And it was like a crazy man. He had an old cardboard box. He was one of these people from the old school of dentistry. And he said he had an old cardboard box. He way down in the box. He was throwing stuff out over his head. He was saying, he says, I can't. He said, I don't know what's wrong. I don't know what can happen here. And I said, well, the fact of the matter is, I still can't see people's face unless they're within 6 or 7 feet of me. And then it got to the point where I could tell people by their dog's face and collar, but not human beings. And I said, how can this kind of disorder
That's
get so?
interesting.
I said, what? How can this disorder get so specific in terms of faces? Because I couldn't see. I couldn't see it. So finally, I wound up at the Eye Institute. I kept pushing to go there, and finally got a doctor, a young woman, who said, oh, I've seen this before. And she says, first of all, you have all the symptoms of the dry eye condition, which means your eyes are going to be watering all the time. And she said, and in addition to that, we you don't see very well, so we'll have to fix that. And like I have eyeglasses on now, I don't see very well still. And I tried 3 or 4 different times. I mean, the vision is really, you know, um, screwed up, But and so that was one of, another kind of issue. But the I think the um, hallucinations was something that I really became very interested in, because again, with the dogs, it was amazing. All of their features were clear. The brain is really strange. All of the features were clear, and they smiled and they looked and they were happy and what have you. they didn't challenge me and they didn't threaten me in any way. And he said, the doctor said, well, we don't want you to see them at all. I said, well, I ain't looking for them. I don't know why it's here. He says, okay, here's the deal. Just don't take it into your mind to either reach out, touch one or something like that. I thought, oh, this is getting crazy. And so then that stopped. But a man, it was so interesting, like a man's head appeared one night and it was just a head. And he says, let me show you what I can do. And I said, oh, and I wasn't speaking or anything. And I didn't get past him because I was on the way to the bathroom. A head appeared and he was drawing in the face and everything. And it was like a calligraphy. And I said, this is crazy. And then so that stopped. That only happened once. And then they made a distinction between what is a hallucination versus a fabrication versus a visualization. And I'm saying, oh, this is crazy. So in many ways, this is certainly a disorder that affects the brain primarily, and then the brain affects the dopamine place where it comes from, and it also affects your bowel. The bowel is attacked, and you may not pay any attention to it. In families, we'll say, "Oh, she's always on the toilet," or he's always on the toilet. What have you? People have to be very, very careful about their toilet habits, because if you are constantly having problems with your bowels and what have you, that's not a good sign at all.
You mentioned constipation. Is that the?
Oh yeah, and you can have constipation for a long, long time. And then when you do have constipation like that, it can turn to little black balls. So that if you caught any of them, you would not have something shaped like a tube. You wouldn't have that like a hot dog or something, but rather you would have a handful of little black balls. That's your stool. And when it comes out, it's painful, and and then the doctor says, oh, you need to see another doctor. You need to see the person who is a specialist in the bowel, and you need to go get us one of those things they tell you to get when you start to be 40, what is it, but everybody gets one. They recommend that you have
colonoscopy.
Colonoscopy, yes. And the colonoscopy, and you have to really follow it up with training yourself to eat properly, and then to take medications, and the medications help you to an extent, but then they hurt you also, because once you take them, you can't stop taking them.
So are you on a lot of different I know I was at a friend's house this weekend and she's on so many medications. Are you on a lot of medications?
Look what I brought for you.
Oh, you brought to show us. Oh boy. So, wow. Oh. Oh. So we didn't mention that Dr. Peggy's husband is a medical doctor, so she's fortunate to have a support system in her home as well as with her primary physicians. So what time? So my friend, her regimen starts at 6 in the morning and it's not over until 10 at night.
Well, my regimen starts at basically 10 in the morning. And then there's an afternoon at 3, and there's an 8 p.m. And originally I was taking all of the medication all at once. I said, let me get this over with. But then the doctor said, no, you don't want to do that. Stagger it so that it'll work together. So over and all, I may take maybe 25 pills a day.
Oh my God.
And once you start, you can't stop for all of them or just some of them?
Just some of them.
Okay. Somebody in the chat is asking, is there a recommended diet? So we know that exercise is crucial. And
Yeah.
you got to tell us about what you told me when you're walking through your neighborhood. Do you remember telling me about your red lipstick and what you told your neighbor?
Yeah, look, when I found out I had this, and apparently I had fallen a few times and I didn't associate it with Parkinson's, but now when I think back on it, I think it was. And it was like I was walking my dog on the street, on the sidewalk, and whoop, you know, I said, what the hell happened here? I had fallen and, I was looking around to see if somebody would help me up. And there was a man talking on the phone across the street. He turned and looked at me and then he just got, went on about his business. I thought, gee, this is a nightmare in here. And then another occasion, but there was something with the street. What happens is that people with Parkinson's get unstable. They're unstable on their feet. And the least little thing can throw you down. And apparently I had no idea of any of this at that time. And I said, well, what's wrong with this concrete that I can't walk on it successfully? And it turned out that, there's some new concrete that is installed, or the old concrete has glass marbles like in it, and it shines. It's different from the other concrete, and not easy to walk on. So I thought maybe that was it. And another time I had fallen on what looked like, common ground, and the dog just sat and waited for me. So I thought, oh my God, that was so scary that I just laid there and crossed my legs and said, somebody will find me. We'll see. And so the dog sat down, said, I'm with you, Peggy. The dog sat on my chest, and it was amazing. And it was the winter time. I said, oh, Lord, you mean to tell me that nobody's going to find me? So then I decided that what I would do is I would go through my neighborhood. Once I found out how extensive and problematic all of this was, I went through my neighborhood and I knocked on the door and I said, look, I live down at the corner. My name is Peggy. You may or may not know me. I said, but if you happen to see me on the street and I don't have red lipstick, bright red lipstick on, call 911. And I said, because something is wrong with me and I'm not drunk, and but I'm sick in a certain kind of way. And then I said, and here's what I want you to do. I'm wearing a watch, a watch from, what are they, those
Oh, you have an
connected.
Apple Watch.
Yeah, I have an Apple Watch. And I said, and what I did, my husband did for me, Dennis did, he put a piece of leather around it. And on that leather, he carved out my name and 3 phone numbers that, we can reach. And I said to them, and so if I fall on the ground, I'm not drunk, I'm not sick in other ways. I said, please, you can call my husband, my daughter, or my son, and tell them your mother is on the street, she needs help. And also, you can press the other button and an ambulance will come. So people say, you got to be kidding. I said, no. I said, girl, you got to look out for yourself, because I mean, I couldn't imagine anything like this happening. Just couldn't imagine it. So I was trying to take, then I bought a 3-wheel bicycle, because you need to be able, because that's the whole issue of staying active, because you can actually feel the bones settling into a status where you can't move out of. And so that hasn't happened to me, but I think it's beginning to, because occasionally I might feel something like that, and it's really forceful how the spine itself twirls somehow and shakes you like that. And then if you talk about your face, it's the one thing to have the wrinkles, but it's another thing is that your temporomandibular joint becomes involved. And that means you don't chew very well. And that's deadly, And so then you have to, you have to see a specialist in the mandibular joint disorders. And regularly you have to do that because, if you have any problems with your teeth, you might not be able to chew properly. You can't swallow properly. You and you're constantly working on your teeth. None of this you can not pay attention to. And then your nails have begin to split. There may be like 20 to 30 lines in it, going from the tip of the nail up to the cuticle. And so that and part of that is associated with aging as well. But with, you get a different kind of phenomena going on with it. And you really wouldn't want, and I'm a person who loves makeup, loves nail polish and whatever, but you don't want to do that because you
Right.
can't see what's happening. And
You might not be able to wear nail polish, but you're not going to lose that red lipstick.
absolutely not. And there's also too with your feet, you get an arthritis in your toes. It's amazing, and that's why people, I think, do a lot of stumbling and they don't think about it. And some people say that they don't want to know any more about it. I'm saying the more that you know about it, the more you can prepare to take care of it.
So we don't have the numbers of the prevalence that it affects Black communities, but I dropped in the chat some information that you can look into. And one of the things that they said that oftentimes Black patients don't get the diagnosis in a timely manner because they're just misdiagnosed or just not treated. Um, and interesting, it says, this thing with your face, because it also affects your eyebrows, you can't raise, and your expressions. So they talked about, I read an article, I think I shared it with you all, where where they said, we know that there's a bias with doctors in the Black community anyway. And one of the bias is that, so if a Black patient comes in and they're not smiling, not showing facial expression, they're considered to be angry or disconnected. But if a white patient comes in with those symptoms, immediately they think Parkinson's disease. And it also talked about, Black folks not wanting to have it affect their work, right? Because they're afraid that they're going to be, if their employer knows that they have this, degenerative disease, that they may be put out of work. So there were, interesting situations that talked about why Black people might, and we know just the normal stuff, they just think that we're not affected. Um, and then there are several. Did you all know some of the Blacks? Let me share this with you. This article with the Black celebrities. I did not know that Maurice White. Did you all know that Maurice White from Earth, Wind, and Fire had? There are five that this article is going to share with you. I'm sharing it now. But you've got Muhammad Ali. Jesse Jackson is the most recently person that I know of diagnosed with it. Maurice White, Brian Grant, and a young lady named, she was an actress, and her name is Victoria Dillard. And she and Brian Grant got it very young. One was 33 and the other was 36. So it's not even age. Um, there's not even an age range for it. So let me put this in the chat. And you all can just chime in. This is a very small group. So if you all want to talk to Dr. Peggy or have a question, you can just, raise your hand or unmute, whichever you want to do, and just engage in the conversation. But did anybody else know about all of those? I think everybody knew about Muhammad Ali.
Yes, Maurice White, but actually Muhammad Ali was misdiagnosed with Parkinson's. So
Really?
yes,
What was he?
he has a nut. It was Parkinson. It's called Parkinson. No, Parkinsonism because it mimics Parkinson's, but it wasn't a true Parkinson's. And so they were treating him like he had Parkinson's for years. And it was a derivative of the disease.
Wow.
And I know this because I'm a speech language pathologist. I've been for 22 years, and most of all of my career has been spent in neuro care. So Parkinson's disease, traumatic brain injury, stroke, and I, just want to let everybody know, please advocate for not just your diagnoses, but your rehabilitation, because I always say the doctor can save you, but it's the rehabilitation specialist that keeps your quality of life at the highest functioning possible, which is the speech therapist, the occupational therapist, and the physical therapist. The speech therapist is going to work on the communication. I have a special certification in the voice, one of the voice treatments for Parkinson's disease, because 100% of patients who have Parkinson's disease will have a change in their voice. That's a clear marker. And so, and also, the swallowing. So people were asking about the swallowing, about the diet. The diet texture might change as the disease gets progressive because, as Dr. Peggy said, you have a difficult time with chewing. So you may have to have foods that are soft and maybe not a chip, and then move into food, that's a little bit more creamier, to get nutrition. And that doesn't happen to everybody, but it can happen. And so the constipation is caused by gastroparesis, which you see a lot of in people who have diabetes, whereas the brain doesn't signal those vessels that innervate your automatic things like breathing and digestion. And so the signal's not coming from the brain correctly, so it doesn't move your food through your system correctly. So it's a lot going on, but what I definitely see is, even if we're diagnosed, that we don't have access to the therapeutic treatments that keep us at our highest level of functioning, and you can do very, very well. And actually, the LSVT, which is what I'm trained in, has a physical therapy, occupational therapy. It was based off of boxing. So some of the stuff that Muhammad Ali did. So, Miss Helen, when you said say physically active, I agree. But sometimes you need to get with that physical therapy so you can know exactly what safely you can do.
And let me just tell you, my experience with when I learned of this problem, I immediately went out and looked for programs that I could become a member of. I did that like overnight, and I especially gravitated towards the Parkinson's boxing. I wanted to do that, and it was very interesting. And there were a number of agencies that were signed up with the Parkinson's Foundation. But here's where the gap is: you can go into those and drop right off the edge. Let me give you an example. So when I went, when I got the diagnosis, and the doctor said, well, listen, there's a Parkinson's boxing program near you. You should go there and they can, you get this exercise, whatever. So I was gung ho. I said, I'm going to do everything right. I'm not going to have any problems at all. And so I go there, and I'm the only Black person in the whole building. And then a person comes in and does this lengthy assessment, and seeing, am I falling? Am I doing this? Am I blah blah blah? Okay, that was great. I said, okay, now I know these things. I said, now here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to make sure that this information goes to my neurologist so that he and you all together can track my successes and whatever. One, I stayed there and made them fill out this form, and I took it to the doctor, the neurologist, so he could see it. They never communicated with him after that for anything. I kept going to that program, and they never introduced me to the white patients at all. I was the only Black patient in the program, and they kept me at a downtown office where the whites went to the suburban office. So I said, well, what's going on here? And so the guy who they had hired to work with me alone, nobody else but he and I, for 6 or 7 months. And we're working with the boxing equipment and what have you. And I said to him, I said, look, Will, I said, let's get real here. I said, can you tell me why I am not with these other people? He said, well, you don't look like you have Parkinson. And this might cause a discomfort for you when you see them or when they see you. I said, oh, is that it? I said, it feels discriminatory. He said, I don't think it is. He said, I just think that if they haven't set it up yet.
Wow.
So I'm saying, so here I am. They have everything going on for a group that's in the suburbs, you know, and I wanted to work with a group because the group would also help me to see things that I'm experiencing alone. That never happened. That was for about 6 months. And finally, I get a check, a bill in the mail that says, this is what you owe us for your such and such. I said, look, nobody ever asked me to sign a contract. This is a major organization. And nobody asked me to do this, da 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 da. I said, so look, I'm not doing anything like that. They had a history of this kind of project, da 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 da. And I said, how does an agency like that, how does it fall down like that? And I happen to be Black. Now, look, I don't wear that heavily. I wear it strongly and identify with it, and I ain't scared of it. But when this happens like that, I said, oh God, that's probably one of the reasons why I agreed to do this or came to do this is because people don't know what's happening. Many people are jumping in there and says, oh, I'm a, a strength builder, I'm a person that helps and, relieving pain and this and that. They have no license, they have no education, they charge you, they do not accept medical insurance. It's a mess. And I don't know how the big foundations who get the money, I don't know how they operate. Because I can tell you, I got good sense. And I fell into a structure and I had to fall out of it because it was just too damn crazy. It was crazy. So then I got a bicycle that I ride. I got, all the weightlifting and stuff. I got a treadmill. I got all kinds of stuff that I use all the time. But the thing that I don't have a single person except what I found on my own was a psychologist. And I said to her, I'm coming to you because it's a nightmare out there. And so I want to talk to you about the things that happen. So I need somebody to help to take the edge off of, all this. I mean, it was very stressful and it continues to be. If you have Parkinson's, in some respects, you're almost on your own. You're almost on your own. And I'm not afraid of anything except misinformation and misrepresentation. And I tell you that, these big organizations who get millions or billions of dollars, I don't know which, it is not copacetic, as we say in the Black community. It's not copacetic out there. And
Yeah.
so I turned
That
to my,
last article I posted talks about a person who was trying to, and it's interesting that you brought that up because I wasn't going to share it because I was like, but it talked about the struggles of getting Black folks to come to um, for these group exercise programs. So what you're saying is very interesting as well. Somebody has here in the chats for you, Dr. Peggy. Does genetics have anything to do with disease, with Parkinson's disease that you're aware of?
I'm certain that it does. You know why?
Why?
Because my father is one of 33 children. His father, we have a slave history. His father was had 33 children. He married three different sisters, one after the other. After each one died, he married them. And those sisters, 7 of them, suffered with what we're talking about now, these degenerative neurological disorders.
It wasn't called Parkinson's, or you don't know?
Oh, no, it wasn't called that, but it had every one of the markers of Parkinson's. And in addition to that, there are other kind of neurological problems too that are related, but no one's ever talked to me about. And that is, I had Bell's palsy when I was 9.
Mm.
And then I had it again on the other side of my face when I was 26. And we lived in a house, and I wanted to find a thing. We lived in a house where we sprayed all the time with DDT, which was killing people right and left as soon as you got it. We lived in a house with chinches and bed bugs, roaches, rats. We were poor people. And we each night, and we had one of the chapters in the book I just wrote about that house. I talked about how the roaches and the rats and all were so bad, and the bed bugs were so bad that at one end of the street you needed to, if you were going to spray for roaches or whatever, you need to go down to the other end of the street, say, I'm spraying today, so get ready, the roaches are coming this way.
Mhm.
I
That
mean,
was
like,
in Baltimore, correct?
yes. And
Mhm.
so, but environmentally, the way we momentarily was getting rid of all of these vermin and whatever, DDT in 1981, Rachel Carson, I think it was 61 or 81, Rachel Carson wrote a book called The Silent Spring. And she pointed out how the people were killing the birds in the air. They were dropping dead from DDT. And let me tell you about us and DDT. We had chinches and roaches so bad that we sprayed the bed mattresses at night, sometimes soaking the sheets in DDT, which was killing off the environment. And sometimes the bedding was wet with it, but we had to lay down and go to sleep. On Saturday mornings, we would get up, we would take the bedding and put it over the fence and spray DDT on it and leave it in the sun. If there was no sun and it didn't get dry, well, that was just too bad. That was my life. And I lived in the shadow of Johns Hopkins University and could walk up there. I could see it. I could see it. And we were dying, that whole neighborhood, the alley houses in Baltimore, we were dying in those things. And we lived around a corner from white medical students and wealthy whites in their marble steps and what have you. And nobody did anything. And so finally, nobody has written a little book like I've written, Life in the Alley House, and all the things that happened to us right in front. I mean, how we survived, I don't know. But for people who have Parkinson's, you check your back history and see if they have a history of having used also peroxides and other, you
You
know,
had herbicides, pesticides.
exactly. And we didn't have an inside toilet, so we had to go out, and we had something like a little outhouse built over a hole. And it turned out that those were what we call in Baltimore the ghost rivers under the ground, spreading, doo-doo and wee-wee everywhere. I mean, like, and so for me, I'm lucky to be alive as far as I'm concerned, with
Mm.
all the things that we had, And so for me, I just decided that when I found this diagnosis, I cried and I cried. And I said, oh my God. And what the neurologist said to me, you have to continue to think. If you don't think, you won't think. You have to continue to write. So that's why I wrote this book. In the way how I wrote this book, I got on Facebook, and I would leave it there. But I did it. I went on my cell phone and found something called notes. And I dictated this book in notes and completed it. And it's, I'm going to try to sell it now, but it's called it was called Life in the Alley House, but now I've changed it to Forged in the Alley House. And so I try to keep alert. I try to keep studying things, but I'm telling you what, I don't know how people can say it. The way I say it is this: I'm talking to my brain all the time because you have to do it. You can't get up in the morning and think you can take this medication willy nilly. No. If it says 9 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 8 o'clock, you better take it then because the effects have worn off, and then you begin to experience things you don't want to experience. It's really quite something. There's more to be said about it. But for Black women, what I think we have to do is that you need to put on your game face and not listen to everything if somebody tells you. You talk to a doctor and they say, and here's something I got caught in, and I was trying to get out of it, but this is how difficult it is. It seems that the medical community, in terms of research with Parkinson's disease, is that they would, once you get identified as Parkinson's, they don't necessarily want you to start taking the complicated medication right away. They would rather you got into a clinical study and 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 um, and really restrict the medicines that you took, and do a lot of different things with you. But if you go the first route, it means you can't go the second route. The first route is the dopamine medications, which you could be sick at the stomach, you could stop eating, you could be restless, you could suffer from things that go on, like you think you're being attacked at night and fight your partner. All of that can happen, and all of that. And, or you can not have those things and something else happens, but you don't know. It just depends on the person. But when I look back at myself, I'm wondering why I'm here. I fought with the pesticides in this old slave quarters, formerly slave quarters. I fought with things that happened to me like the Bell's palsy twice, not once, twice. We lived through the rats and the roaches and the vermin and all of that. And when I finally came into the attention of the, professionals, the guy said, there's something wrong with your heart. You got to get that checked out. And it turned out that there are so many things that all tied together, and they seem to have some look of Parkinson's. Now, what has happened to me has not necessarily going to happen to everybody. But the thing that I'm most afraid of is getting up one morning and I don't recognize me in the mirror. That can happen. And I've seen dementia patients, for example, and every one of the problems most of the problems with this disorder is that it has its own form of dementia, whether it's Lewy bodies in the brain, or whether it's the Parkinson's itself. But the things, like that, you look at it, where did I have? Like it's amazing. I said, my God, it's amazing to have lived this long. And they say, like, for example, I said to myself, you better advocate for yourself in the medical community. Don't be scared of nobody.
Right.
I don't care where they come from. Don't be scared of nobody. Advocate for yourself, challenge them, stay on record. Because when you get ready to go get diagnosed, and then you go back regularly to be checked, somebody sees you for 15 minutes. And often it's not even a doctor. And then but some of the MAs are, okay. So now you got a loss of dopamine to the brain. loss of ability to control the face, which I worry about. I'm a pretty lady. I can't imagine seeing myself looking like, what was that? But it might happen, it might not happen. And you might lose the ability to speak. Can you imagine me not speaking? That is not my thing. And then their facial blindness, not being able to see people. And I figured that I was going to be all right because I could still see the faces of the dogs that people were walking with. And now I can't see that. It's just amazing. Everything, I can't, I don't know how to
So
do it.
it's you can feel the progression of the disease
Oh,
already.
yeah. And it's slight. But
Yeah.
what I feel the most about it is the brain. It's
Mm.
like being in the kitchen and turning away from the countertop and walking over to the stove, 2 steps, and not knowing why you stepped over there.
It happens to all of us, Dr. Peggy.
Well, listen, and I
But
know
I
that.
understand. I
Yeah,
understand. It's more
when,
you're aware
yeah,
of
you're
what's
aware.
happening to you, so you're more conscious of it.
Yeah, and because that's the nature of who I am. And then there's the constant constipation, the loss of appetite. And I feel like I'm going back through a stage of loss of appetite again. And it's like I was like 178, I went down to 134,
Right.
and
Yeah. Mhm.
some of your sight, loss of smell, and people don't want to eat because it's the smell that
The
tantalizes you
smell.
and helps you to salivate and all of that. No, they won't do that. And
So
then
I know
there's,
you're writing. Are you still reading? I know you want to exercise your brain
oh
muscles. So
yeah,
are you reading, or do you not
well,
have the attention span, or
I read every day.
oh, you
I,
do? Good.
yeah, I read
Good,
every
good.
day. And then, but, and
Mm-hmm.
then, and then there's a depression with it, and you have to fight that, the
Mm-hmm.
hallucinations, although that's not such a problem. But then your heart is affected also. And I had to be carried off to the emergency room. I'm saying, Jesus Christ. And then the skin is affected, so working on that. Um, but how to stay
Can you
med.
talk to us for a minute, Dr. Peggy, if you will, about why it was important for you to come here and have this conversation? What was your motivation?
I guess partly I've always been a verbal person. I always saw myself as somebody that had a story to tell because my life was so different. And I look back on myself. That's why I wrote stuff down, so that I could remember things. I can remember the poems that I wrote. I can remember all kinds of things. And so that was important to me. And what I wanted women to know, especially Black women, we don't have to be scared of nobody. The things that are happening to us in the overall government is nightmarish. And what we have to do is hold on to our sanity. Don't lie about anything. Don't kid yourself about anything. And build a group of people around you. I don't care whether they're white or Black or green. Build a group of people that you can pick up the phone and say, I'm desperate. I need help right
Mm-hmm.
now. Can you help me?
Mm-hmm.
And I, like I said, in my neighborhood, I went door to door and told them, listen, I'm suffering with Parkinson's, and you may not see what you normally would see, but that's not the case with me. But if you see this, call this, do that, and follow up, and blah, blah, blah. And everybody, let me tell you, every single person said, oh my God, my father had that, or my mother had that, and blah, blah, blah. And so now the children know me, the family knows me. That's what we have to do. And we have to read. Even today, I found out something different. Here's what's going on. And, you just wonder. And, I don't know how anybody is making it. And my husband, I have to reassure him that he's the most important person in my life because I think about the fact it don't matter whether you got $1 million or $2 million or what have you. in a medical care or whatever. The fact of the matter is, it all goes
Support system.
very rapidly, and you don't know who you're dealing with. You got to find out.
So I'm going to ask you this question because you wanted me to. So you all know that she told me to ask this question about intimacy.
Oh
Are
yeah.
you do at one people? Well, I think we assume at a certain age that there is no intimacy, and then coupled on with the Parkinson's disease. So is that has your life changed in that way?
Oh yeah. There's a big life change because the uh, the capacity for me, the capacity to even desire intimacy disappears. It disappears with the medications. And so if you want intimacy, you have to work at it. You really have to work at it. And I remember, and there's certain medications that the doctor shouldn't give you without saying to you, oh, by the way, you might never have an orgasm again.
Mm.
Or worse yet, you might never want to. And how do you fix that if it's broken? And if people would keep notes of who they are, so that over time they can look around and say, oh, I used to do A, B, C, D, and E. What the hell happened to that? And force it. But what I have found is that if you're aggressive, and I try not to be too aggressive and scare physicians and what have you, but I said, look, talk to me like I'm your mother or your sister or your older daughter and help me sort this out because this don't seem right. If you constantly run into the doctor because you're having a urinary tract infection, that's a bad scene. And no one. I have a sister who's not even a year older than me. She's in a nursing home in Baltimore, Maryland. Just a beautiful human being. She can't walk. She can
Mm.
barely talk, and she can't hold anything. Her mind is very bright. I would swear that my sister Audrey has Parkinson's, but I don't know. And her children are, they do a different thing, but they take care of her. I mean, I think it's more than a year. She's been like
Wow.
flat on her back, and you disintegrate, you know, with that sort of thing. But it's, I don't know. So if somebody said to me, Peggy, are you scared? Yes.
Mm.
Yes, because
Mm.
I don't want to forget how to write. I don't want to
Right.
forget how to read. I don't want to interpret, incorrectly. I don't want you see my library here of things, a whole wall here and was over there as well. And up on the third floor, a whole room of papers. And every day I weep about the fact that I have valuable documents that have never seen the light of day, written by Black women that no one knew anything about. And I found her and I found her papers and I went across the country and got people to give me things they knew about her. And I have all of that, and that's it. And I'm saying, oh Lord, don't let me leave here and not finish the story of this woman.
Yeah.
It's incredible, the whole experience. And
Yeah.
yes, I feel frightened, you know, but sisters gotta do what they gotta do.
I appreciate your candidacy. Does anyone have any questions that you just want to come online and ask Dr. Peggy? Want to make sure that we
Yeah.
um, had anyone heard of the facial masking? I think Sherry told me in the chats it's called facial masking. Has
Yeah.
anyone? I had never heard of that before. Was
We
that new?
No, I mean it was new to me, and none of the doctors or anybody that I saw ever said a word about it.
Usually the facial masking is the first thing you notice in people with Parkinson's. their face doesn't move. Not the
No, the facial recognition where they
Now
can't
that's different.
see.
That's different from the facial
Yeah,
masking. The facial
Okay.
masking is when the face doesn't move.
yeah,
But that facial recognition, that's something that's new to me that I
Mm,
had never been exposed
yeah.
to
mm,
in my training. Yeah, that's
mhm.
really new.
I think it's pronosia,
Yes, I
yeah.
put it in
Somebody
the
put it
chat.
in the chat. Oh, was that you? Okay. Miss
Uh-huh.
Rice, did you have a question? I see you unmuted. Did you want to ask Dr. Peggy something?
I'm just fortunate to live in Buffalo with Dr. Peggy and her dear friend, Dr. Barbara Nevergold.
Sonia,
And
my love.
hi. And
Hi.
they've been my idol for probably since I was 12 years old, and that was
Oh,
last
wonderful.
century. So I feel very fortunate to be able to hear her speak about this. And there's some other people in the community who've also been diagnosed.
Mhm.
And it means the world to get an understanding what's happening to my loved ones.
Yeah. And we should
And
all
I
be,
love, Dr. Peggy, that I think most people, their pride wouldn't let them I think that was very brave of you to say, hey, look, neighbors, if you see me falling down or whatever, don't make up a story about me. I'm not drunk. I'm not on drugs. I have an illness and I need you to come to my aid. Um, Sonia, were you aware of this prior to today, Dr. Peggy's condition?
No, when I saw you had posted it, I just said, "Oh my God, Peggy," um, and knew that I was going to tune in.
I'm so glad that you did. That makes me feel great. It really does, because we did a lot of work in the community. And one of the things that we did when we tried to get the bios of women, Black women, so we could build the Crown Queens Network, the thing that struck me the most was the women who were living alone and nobody was following up. And you go to a person's house, a woman's house, and just a lovely person, very smart and everything. Everything was dirty, just disheveled, and you saw two people together. The wall was falling in, and you didn't know about it and everything. And whenever I would leave those places, those houses, I would say, "Oh Lord, don't let that happen to me." And all over the country, stuff like that happens, and that's why Barbara and I focused on who we identified as uncrowned queens, to say, Lordy, don't let them live like this. Mm-hmm. And it is really quite a problem, I wish that I had the energy that I used to have to be able to go out and knock on doors and say, okay, y'all, this rest period is over. Let's get this thing going again. Talking to one and knocking on the door. What's the matter with you? What can I do for you today, right now? And we stopped doing that.
Yeah,
We did. We stopped. And
that's
you don't have to go to a church to do it.
mhm.
In some
Yeah,
respects, the church is the euthanasia of the masses.
mhm. Now that's
Let's
a whole
see.
nother topic we can get into. Yeah. So anybody else have anything you want to ask? I think Sherry left us. She's put in the chat she had to go to a meeting. I wanted to thank her so much for
Yeah.
coming and for sharing. I didn't know. So when we were talking earlier today, I said, I guess I should have tried to get a doctor who can talk to us specifically about Parkinson's. So I'm glad Sherry was on to share
Oh
her.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah,
Very
yeah.
powerful.
So Miss Rice, we need you to keep an eye out for Dr. Peggy, and I'm sure I don't have to tell you that now that you know you can
She's much beloved and treasured in our community.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, when I fell in love with Miss Higgy, because of the work that they were doing, the whole group was doing. And I just liked it. I really liked it, and I liked being associated with it. So I was just saying, like my husband is an interesting person too, because when I told him I was going to do this, he said, okay. So, okay. Because
I thought it
he
was so selfless of you, and I thought it resonated with the person that I know you to be, that you're very, very pro our community and certainly Black women. And this is something that affects us, and you wanted us to know. And I commend you for it. I truly, truly commend you for it.
and we, I wish I had the energy to go out into the community and say, look, this is what we're going to do. And maybe I might be able to do that for a short time with a handful of other women to say, look, we will not suffer in silence. This condition will make you suffer in silence because it's every day, all times of day, all the time. Even the dog knows what time you should take your medication. It's just amazing. And like I said, for me to take this this amount of medications all day long, figuring it out, and then the mind plays tricks on you because then it says, I see myself checking my watch because I now get a notice on my watch, a ring that says it's time for medications at 3 o'clock, and be sure to eat something with it. And it's incredible. It is quite a job just to stay to be able to function. And one of the things that I hate the most about this is that, and you may not have seen it, but I think you have, and that is that when you're at least talking with it, with people, the brain is talking to you all the time in a very strange way because it's trying to help you to sort out stuff. It's just amazing how hard it is to stay on track when it's like you're talking to somebody on a Monday and you lose a word on Monday. It doesn't come back until Tuesday afternoon. You know, Tuesday, I'm serious, on Tuesday afternoon. And the way the brain works, it throws it into the conversation you're having at the time. And you're saying, what has happened here? And so I advocate for people trying to understand what it is that's happening to you, because then you'll do something different. You won't drink Coca-Colas, or you won't eat red meat, or you want to make sure you don't have pesticides in food, all sorts of things like that. So but I'm so glad to see you here. I'm just delighted.
So one of the other things that you wanted me to put out there is, would you participate in studies for Parkinson's?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I
Mhm.
would. Because from what
Mhm.
I've read, and I've read a lot of things, what I've read is that, and that I know is that exercise, for example, does help you. But but it's I don't mean any kind of jive exercise. You really have to do that. You have to see the body working. They got some fantastic programs on Facebook. You can, and so what I've done when I saw, I said, oh, so I engage in facial exercises every day, at
Okay,
least 2 times a day.
very good.
And to
We
do that,
have mhm.
and so to do that, and then socializing. That's why when I go everywhere, I go in my blog, and I stopped driving because I lost my sense of security and feeling about,
Yeah.
and we had just gotten a new car, and I said, oh damn, I can't even drive this because because I have no real sense of where I am sometimes.
Right.
So
That and I would think with the facial recognition, is there also a failure to recognize other things that it would seem to me your doctor would have told you to stop driving. They didn't?
no, nobody said. I said
Wow.
I was going to stop driving, but yet they say continue intellectual activity, reading, writing,
Yeah.
board games, cards, Sudoku,
Right.
whatever, jigsaw puzzles,
Yeah.
word searches. Those last things I never did anyhow, but I do read every day, and I read about the woman that I'm writing about. Oklahoma University Press is waiting for a 600-page document from me on her life. The people
Right.
who reviewed the book for me said that the woman should be written about. She was extremely important, but they cited some issues with it that I understand what it is. One is that I may have made something, said it twice, but I couldn't work it out. Or I may have said something that didn't sound quite right or something else. And I realized what it was. I realized what it was. It was like the brain was saying one thing, I understood another thing, and I maybe wrote another thing. So it was hard for
A
me
lot.
to go back. I mean, if there was anything to cry about, it would be that
Right.
really that I couldn't clear up my own errors. Maybe a day later, I might see it on the page and say, "Oh, Peggy, why would you say that?" But it was, it was hard. That's the hardest thing now. And he talked to you about the aerobic exercise, which I do, and not as much as I could because you get tired. And the
We
social.
have we have two questions. I want to get them in before we run out of time. Miss McClare, are you still here? Sue McClare, is she still here? St. Clair, I'm sorry. Miss St. Clair, did you want to ask a
Yeah,
question?
yeah. Well, first I wanted to, oh, I forgot I have this off there. First I wanted to say happy birthday. I saw that
Thank
your
you.
birthday is in a couple of days. And I
Oh,
have
Wow.
just been enthralled with what you have been sharing about your own journey with Parkinson's, as well as what diagnostically all the different symptoms that a person can experience if they end up having Parkinson's.
mhm.
But even more than that, I really love that you shared the environmental aspects of any of these chronic kinds of conditions that a person can have, because you never know how much of it is environmental.
Mhm.
And I think about my stepfather who had Parkinson's, and my brother who has MS, multiple sclerosis.
Mhm.
And in the area that we grew up, multiple sclerosis is a big thing. A lot of people
Yeah.
are getting it. And so a lot of and then in another area where um, Black homes were built on top of um, landfills,
Mhm.
people were
Especially
getting
in New
cancer.
Jersey.
Mhm.
Well,
Big,
in my
big
case, it was
problem in
in
New Jersey.
New Jersey. In my case, it was in South Bend, Indiana. And I just lost one of three sisters of friends that I grew up with. All three sisters developed cancer. And
Mhm.
so in the program that I do, Spirit of Blackness, one of the programs that we did was on environmental impact of Black people living in areas that are not healthy
Of
for
course.
them. They're pushed to
Naturally
these areas
push.
over
Yeah.
where white people live. And these are the consequences. And so everything that you shared about the conditions you live in, from the bed bugs to the mice and the outhouse, that's I grew up with that.
I'm telling you.
And so
And you know how hard it is to get rid of a chinch, just one of them. We call it chinches. And
yeah,
I'll never forget, I was teaching a course at UB called Environmental Racism. And
yeah.
the course was packed. And
Mhm.
I was talking about the chinches or the bed bugs. And a Hispanic student jumped up and said, El Chuchurero! And he jerked off his shirt. He said, I am coming. Look how they bite me at night all over.
And you're so vibrant and so alive in your sharing of this. And so it just made it very engaging for me. So I just wanted to express that.
And
Thank
let
you
me,
so much for being here. I felt like I needed to come on and listen.
oh,
Thank you.
I
absolutely.
appreciate that. And just so you all know, Miss St. Clair is going to be our guest towards the end of the month, and she's
Oh,
going to
great.
talk about she does. We're going to narrow down. She's got a lot of topics. We're going to narrow down what she's going to talk about, but I promise you it's going to be interesting. So
And
thank you,
yeah,
Miss.
thank you so much for your comments. But the environment is so important.
It
Mhm.
is. It
We're
is.
we're going to
So we have another question from Judy. Judy, what's your question, babe?
Oh, Doctor, thanks for sharing your story and also for giving us the heads up for what many of us might be looking at.
yeah,
And you mentioned something about reading aloud, and were you saying that that was something that was helpful
yeah,
or in, in maintenance or preventative?
yeah. And it's so funny. There's a crazy kind of sound that I used to make when I was younger. And I shared it with Dennis when we first met, and he laughed and whatever. It sounds kind of wild, but I practice it every day when I go out. It's like a yell, you know, and so that my people that know me recognize, okay, here comes Peggy. It's I don't want to try to do it, but it's loud, and it assures me that I can make a sound and continue to make a sound. And so anybody who knows my sound would say, and saw me and never heard it would say, wait a minute now, where is that sound? What's going on? So you gotta ask people to check on you. Can I still make that ridiculous sound? You know, I
So the
can't.
reading out loud is good for your
Yeah.
for hearing, for just enunciating
And,
all of
and I
it.
told one of my neighbor, I said, listen, she has 2 children. I said, can you ask your children that whenever they see me anywhere, but even if I come out on the porch, that they holler out, hey, Miss Peggy, in case I forget my name.
Mhm.
And so the children are involved now. And it's like to see somebody say, hey, Miss Peggy, because you don't know. You don't know if all of these things are going to happen to you or not.
Right.
And I'm not, I'm scared, but I'm not frightened. Like I just want to be able to take care of myself, and be able to help myself if anything happens to me, or if you get lost, you can say to somebody, I got information, maybe you can help me find myself or where I go. But and in some instances, it may not even be anything like that. I just don't know. But I do know that the history of the disease is that it is not play favorites with anyone, so you just don't know.
Thank
Well,
you.
I agree with Miss St. Clair, who says you are so vibrant.
Mhm.
And I am so grateful that you wanted to come here and share this information with us. Um, I am sure that there are people who are listening to you who have someone in their circle, in their family, themselves, who may or may not be affected by Parkinson's. And it's so interesting because there's been a change in my voice, and I read somewhere that it's a raspy kind of thing. I'm like, oh. So I may need to even get just a checkup. I don't know. It's probably I went to the ENT guy. He told me something I don't remember, but I didn't do whatever it was. But something to think about. So I encourage everybody, if you can read the links that I shared, one of them specifically talks about symptoms that we can be looking for and be cognizant of. We probably want to convince ourselves that other things are going on with us. I was also glad that I think it was Miss St. Clair who mentioned MS because that's another
Mhm.
um,
And
uh,
lupus. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, and lupus. And lupus, those are big things. Well, lupus is a big thing in the Black community. But
Mhm.
more and more people I think are even being affected with MS. So we
Mhm.
need to familiarize ourselves with it, not only for ourselves, but for our loved ones, right? So Dr. Peggy, I don't want to tire you out.
No,
It's
I'm good.
you're good, because we're over an hour and a half, and I
Hey,
don't want to abuse your time. I
you're
appreciate you
not.
coming.
I,
Yeah,
I must tell you that this meeting like this and discussing this has helped me. It has reduced the sadness. I have sadness about this, and I'm frightened about it as well. But my husband always says to me, "Oh, you ain't bad off, Peggy. You're all right. You're all right." So
You are blessed though that you are blessed because you've got your daughter, your son, and your husband. Some people, like you said, are single and going through these kinds of things on their own. So to have a support system is powerful.
Very powerful. But I do think that Black women, because that's the whole reason we started talking originally, Black women need to get together and say there are other things that we have to surround and look at it very carefully and see how it affects us. And Parkinson's is one of them. I mean, there's some big stuff that people are doing. The big stars are doing all kinds of stuff and whatever, but that's really affecting us. And I think we should start something where we begin to talk about this and look at this and see what happens, and so we can be intelligent about stuff. Because I now have grandchildren that I didn't have 2 or 3 years ago. And God, I mean, like when my father did something very interesting. My father had been a drunkard, alcoholic all of his life from the time he was 9 up until he was maybe 60. And then, but my father had, and see, for a split second, I lost my train of thought. I know
Okay, you were talking about your father, and that he had been an alcoholic for much of his life.
Yes, and so now I can pick that up, like the space that was in between, I can grab onto that. And
Okay.
he was alcoholic all of his life, and we never really, he said he never learned how to read or whatever, but we didn't know that. But one day my father was sick and I took him to the hospital because he had an appointment for his heart. And while we were sitting there, he said to me, Peggy, I need to tell you that you need to just look out for things. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, and he had a 2nd grade education. And he said, because your mother had 14 sisters. And he said, and 7 of them died with the same thing that she died from. I said, really? What was that? He said, they just didn't know who they were anymore. He was talking about Alzheimer's. He was talking about that. I said, oh, I didn't know that, Dad. But my father, who had, spent his life with me going to find him in the gutters and drag him home, had the presence of mind to say to his youngest child, look, be on the lookout. Your mother has Alzheimer's. All of her, half of her sisters had it. And I just want you to know. And that's all he said.
Wow.
And so we need to have this. It's a kind of dialogue, with, one another. But I just found it remarkable that my father, who had been in a psychiatric institution, who had been a drunkard, and we never left him. We took care of him as best we can. Was saying, oh, listen, in case you don't know about that. And gee, so
Wow.
talking to people about it.
Yeah,
And
it's important. It's definitely important. Judy, you have another question, babe?
Yeah, I may have missed this response earlier. Doctor, if you wouldn't mind sharing, how old were you when they diagnosed your condition, and I guess sort of how long did it take between the first time that you thought you had a condition of some sort and to when they got to the diagnosis?
well, I mean, I never thought I had Parkinson's, but it wasn't long. I mean, like maybe a week or so when they finally said, I went through a series of tests, and they said, we think you have Parkinson's. I said, you got to be kidding. I said, no, we think, you don't look like somebody that has Parkinson's, but
No,
and
you don't.
that's because you don't see me trembling. But a
And that's
tremble,
what I was going to say. That's the symptom that when I see people shaking, I think they have Parkinson's when they
and
can't control their hands.
and
And
for
you're
me,
steady.
but
You're
it's
absolutely
people's
steady.
fingers that started a little tremor in them. and none over here, but over here, these two fingers, and then they kind of get stuck occasionally. And so I'm on the computer all the time, so I kind of, you know, attributed to arthritis of the fingers, because it's, but that's not necessarily the case. But they are always testing here. And I never knew the direct connection between touching the fingertips and the brain.
Hmm.
We're just learning things, and no one ever told you anything like that. No doctors ever told you anything like that. So I think when people go to the doctor and see the doctor, say, look, I got some questions to ask you, write them down. Make this part of my job. I want people to know that I asked you about this, so that you
Yeah.
can keep a record,
Especially now that we have these portals with all that information in it anyway.
And the fact that we are all being asked to be actually our own medical historian. Because what they're saying is, you got a problem? Go to this site and write me a note.
Right.
We didn't do that before.
For sure. So how old were you when you were diagnosed? You did say, but I don't remember.
80.
I'm sorry.
80.
How old were you?
80.
80. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't hear
Yeah.
you. I didn't hear you.
80. Yeah.
So just last year.
Yeah. Basically.
Yeah.
And somebody asked you asked me if I would participate in a study. A interesting thing that I found out was that when you go to a big institute like the Dent Institute, the institute is interested, and I'm glad they are. They are interested in, doing clinical trials. I'm not opposed. I know what a clinical trial is. I've been in them before, but I would be in a clinical trial with no problems. However, somebody else might say, but if you go to the clinical trial, you may never be one of the recipients of medication ever, because you're in a randomized clinical trial. And when you're in a randomized clinical trial, you might be one of the people who don't get to take the medicine. On the other hand, the neurologists already know about the work that, the medication that you get now. They already know what that does. And they're saying that if you take levodopa, levodopa 2, if you take those, we know the impact that's going to have on you right away. We know that. But we don't know what will happen to you if you don't take anything and you're in a clinical trial. So that's really a choice to make.
Yes.
Would you be in the clinical trial, or would you go ahead and take this medication? And they advertise online all the time. Have you ever taken levodopa? And now the choice is critical. It says, if you have never taken levodopa, then you qualify to be in this study. But if you have ever taken it, because of the things that it does, if you have never taken it, it's a whole different ballgame. But if you've taken it before, you don't qualify for the clinical trial. However, and this is all that's on the internet. So, I'm not doctoring it, it's on the internet, that if you don't take the levodopa, then everything that has been happening to you will continue for a while, long
And I
while.
would imagine it has to also do with they want to be able to isolate what are the effects of that particular medicine. And
And
the other point that came to mind when you said what you about being with having medications withheld from you is that you in a trial, there are some people on real medicine and some people on a placebo.
that's what I'm talking about. That's all. And you can
Yeah,
spend the time on a placebo and be sick as a dog. But that's
right.
what happens in clinical trials. I got no
Exactly.
problem with that. I've worked with clinical trials before, but I would try it. And then the other thing that they talked about is what they call deep brain stimulation, which really goes straight to the area that produces the dopamine. And I met a man from the Parkinson's Foundation, and he said that his his father had had the deep brain stimulation, and he wasn't all that happy with it. And so I said, well, one never knows. Would I do something like that? I think I would, if I thought it would. If it would help me to be able to continue, even like I am. I still feel lost sometimes in terms of conversation, or I still feel the biggest thing that I experience is anxiety. The anxiety is absolutely incredible.
That makes sense.
And
That makes sense.
it's terrible anxiety. And you take medicine for it, like sertraline, and then you can't take too much of anything. So this has been very pleasant for me to
Well, I am so happy. If everybody could come off mute and show Dr. Peggy some love. I'm so appreciative that she spent this time with us.
And let's think about how we might put together a talking group.
I'm sorry, say that again, Dr. Peggy.
You could think about how we could put together a talking group and talking about the impact of Parkinson's, because millions of people have it. Millions of people.
Absolutely.
For Black people to be able to, walk into a clinic and get some assistance or whatever, we need to make sure that that's present.
Yeah. And that they're armed with the proper questions to ask, that they, have some, and like you said, advocate for yourself. Don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. And I love that you saw the one doctor and you're like, I need another opinion. Because you said when you went back to the other doctor, he was like, so you didn't believe what I said, but you didn't care. You asked.
And I still see him, because he's much, much older. And so he has a bevy of experiences that the other person doesn't have.
Right. Yeah. But a lot of, especially, I'll say especially Black people, I think a lot of patients, we're not trained to question doctors, and some doctors don't appreciate it. So kudos to you for doing it, and kudos to your doctor for understanding why you did it.
Yeah, and I told
and now you still see them both. So you're getting
exactly.
You're getting information.
As long as the insurance companies pay both of you and
yes.
then we all right. Because this whole question of how do you get care, how do you pay for it, and what have you, and I'm saying if somebody didn't have a job, they wouldn't have access to what I have access to.
Right. Exactly.
They wouldn't have that. I can't imagine somebody going to sleep at night and not being able to rest, and all kinds of stuff happens to you. It's just amazing.
Well, I always forget my people on the phone. Does anybody on the phone have a question that you want to ask? I see Denise is here. I don't recognize the other two numbers. Does anybody on the phone have a question that you want to ask, Dr. Peggy? Okay, I'm going to guess not. And on that note, Dr. Peggy, I'm going to thank you again and again and again for coming and doing this with us. I'm going to take you and I off the spotlight, so that we can thank you properly for coming. And if we do this conversation again, I hope that, if you don't mind, we'd like to check in with you. If you're okay, you let us know. I don't want to ever make you uncomfortable. But if you want to check in with us in a couple of months, that would be great. Let us know how you're doing.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you so much.
Marvelous.
Thank you, Dr. Peggy.
Thank you, Dr. Peggy.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Peggy.
Giving us an education.
Happy birthday.
And happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you, Dr. Peggy.
Yes, happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you.
You have no idea how wonderful that this makes me feel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Peggy.
Thank
We're
you.
happy to do it, because when Black women gather,
Amazing things happen.
Yes.
this has been
Keep
another
rocking that red
amazing.
lipstick.
This is
Huh?
this is
I told her to keep rocking that red lipstick.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
When we see you without the red lipstick, we'll know something's gone. We'll know. We'll know something's gone. So that if we see you in a couple of months, you don't have on red lipstick, we'll know.
Right, we're coming out there.
Yeah, wonderful.
All right. I'm going to stop the recording, and if I can find it, I'll stop. I do this every week, right? I should know where it is. There it is. Okay. Thanking you again, and we'll stop recording. We can hang out for a few more minutes. I'll tell you a few things what's going on next.